And we have the one, the only June Kinoshita in
Ooh.
the waiting room. I'm going to bring in June, the fabulous and incomparable June Kinoshita, who we all know and love.
Here she comes.
You have to mute your Facebook there, June. But I love that you were watching along. That's awesome.
Here she comes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have to. I've been watching the Facebook. I had to mute one so I could listen to
that is the trick. Yes, that is the trick. I know. I've learned that too on my end. I'm like, I want to be able to see the comments, but I don't need to hear the echo, right?
Especially when you're in, there's a slight delay, so that gets a little weird. Awesome. I'm going to let you two chat it up because I have the great pleasure of talking to June every day, which I love.
Okay, you had enough of me, I know.
Never. June Kinoshita, welcome.
Hello.
Thanks for partaking in yet another year, another show. Oh my goodness. I mean, you are the person that brought this little idea of a podcast to, what it is. Remember receiving that email back saying, yeah, we'd be interested to experiment with a podcast idea, blah, blah, blah. And I think that email was from you. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, well, it was. It was
pretty amazing.
Really, I was waiting for someone like you to come along because I was we need a podcast. I was like looking around for like any volunteers. Like, no.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. What's the podcast? Believe me, I got a lot of that early on, before everybody had one. And I'm glad they do. I'm glad there's a lot of them out there for whatever you need, entertainment, education, whatnot. It's a great platform. And that's how I learned. I like to listen and now it's watch. Podcasts have come a long way. But the fact that, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, have you watched that series, Murders, Only Murders in the House?
No.
Have you seen that one?
I got to write that down. What is that one?
It's
Only Murders in the Building. It's
only Murders in the Building. Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Lee.
Voice from Beyond, but it's so fabulous. Go watch it.
And it's with Selena Gomez and Steve.
Steve Martin, right?
Martin and Martin Short. So, and they have a real-time murder mystery podcast.
Really?
Just kind of accidentally, but it's hilarious. The story's funny, but the kind of gentle ribbing of the whole podcast phenomenon is hilarious too. So,
yes. I can take
everybody
that. Yes. So you have a lot of things that you do and you've dabbled in, and now, you're in everything. You're kind of within the DNA of FSHD Society, June. Tell us though, what are you up to now?
Oh my goodness.
That's a lot,
let's see. Well, I think the big, kind of to my surprise, when I joined the society, I didn't think of myself. I was always a science geek. I worked with a lot of scientists, but over the years, I've somehow ended up co-authoring a whole ton of papers, which I hadn't really set out to do. It's just one day I woke up like, oh gosh, and it started out with writing up the sort of summary or proceedings of the scientific conferences. So I would be organizing the conference and herding the cats and getting them together. And so I would somehow end up on those papers. And then last year we did this survey, which, and I love this because I think it's such an important example of how the community out there, all of you listening who live with FSHD, you embody, you have the expertise on what living with FSHD is, how it affects you, how it, affects you physically, mentally, socially, in all aspects. You are the experts. You may not know it. You may not think of yourself that way, but you are. You know far more than any doctor who read about, it in a textbook. And so I do a lot of kind of listening, eavesdropping. I don't know if it's eavesdropping, but like FSH, Facebook groups like Living with FSHD and Friends, FSHD Friends, and so on, because people share their experience, they ask their questions, and I jump in when I can to help answer questions and so on. But I saw a lot of people commenting about kind of urinary and bowel issues, which you don't think of as neural, FSH is classified as neurological, and even though it's not even nerves, it's muscles. But people were like really bothered by this because it's something that can affect your daily life. And it kind of makes sense that if your muscles are affected, that would include muscles that control all sorts of body functions. Your abdominals are affected, and how that affects your internal organs is kind of common sense in a way. But people, I was asking neurologists, these sort of experts in FSH, and said, well, our patients don't mention anything about that. And I thought, well, maybe they don't want to, or they don't think it's related, or they're embarrassed to talk about it, and you don't ask them, so it just doesn't come up. So it's kind of invisible, but there it is in the community. People were talking about it. So I connected with Kathy Matthews at the University of Iowa and said, have you ever heard about this or thought about it? And I feel like it makes sense, but nobody studied it. And she said, I think it makes sense. We should learn more about it. So she collared a medical student, a fellow, and said, why don't you do this as a research project? They developed a survey, and we sent it out to the FSHD Society members. Nearly 700 people answered, which is kind of amazing. And that led to a paper. It was presented at our International Research Congress this summer. Then there was a webinar this fall, and they're now submitting it for publication in a medical journal. And so I'm like the second author on this, just because I was listening.
That's great.
But I feel like I'm doing it on behalf of the community, that I'm just sort of the bullhorn that listening and passing along what you are all telling. But
the bullhorns, maybe, that's a little loud, and obnoxious sounding maybe sometimes, especially if you hit the wrong button and it makes the alarm go off. No, you are definitely the voice to help, for all of us, and the blog posts that you write. And I understand you're also part of the is it the Gathering Place that we kind of have?
The Gathering Place, yes.
That is huge. All those groups, those subgroups and things kind of coming together in one place. Tell us a little bit about that too.
Well, I think it's part of this idea that people in the community are experts, but we're also, people that support that people get from each other just by being together, and then sharing what they know is so important. So the Gathering Place, the first group that started was the Wellness Hour. Yeah. And that was right after the pandemic started. And we were very concerned about people getting isolated and the mental health toll. So, I don't know if you remember, we did this kind of sequester camp for 6 months. And that was every week, just people getting together and sharing and talking and very openly addressing, how are you doing with your mental health and how do you cope? If you're isolated and not seeing anybody and, you're not getting the support you need. Right. So that then evolved into the Wellness Hour, and have an incredible group of people from our community who are psychologists and psychiatrists and nurses and just volunteers. We formed a task force, and we said, well, what can we do? How can we serve people better? So that grew into the Wellness Hour. We have had something like 250, 300 people have signed up for it. And every month, maybe 30 to 40 people show up. And some are regulars. They love it there. It's their community. Other people come in, they're new for the first time. But it's always a really fantastic conversation. Sometimes we have a guest speaker, and the ideas really just come from the participants. We were back in the fall, we're saying, when winter comes, many of us struggle with cold weather. Yeah. And does it have to do with FSHD? And I said, well, let me find somebody who can answer that question. So I turned to Mark Tarnopolsky up at McMaster in Canada, and he works a lot in FSHD, but he happens to do sports physiology. That's how he got into muscle disease. So if anyone knows why, the role of muscles in keeping your body warm, he knows. So I invited him on, and he kind of explained how the muscle, huge part of our body's metabolism takes place in the muscle. And when your muscle is compromised, your ability to regulate heat and cold, diminish. But then he came with a whole grab bag of things that he uses to keep warm, including, he said, like ice, that's like his biggest worry in cold weather is you'll fall.
Yes.
And so he was like, I've got these boots that have little broken shards of glass in the bottom and they keep you from falling. I'm like, wow, yeah.
He brought a lot of info to the table.
Yeah.
So then I'm not crazy. I do get colder. Is that what you're telling me, June? Wow.
It really happens when you have a muscle condition. And so you want to stay ahead of it. Don't let yourself get cold. Plan ahead. Keep, extra layers and keep the little pocket warmers and all those things.
Huh. That's fascinating. Yeah, that's something that I definitely wanted to plug that you were on, was that the kind of the gathering, space that people can have these different things. So there's the wellness hour. What else is within that cluster, within that group?
So then there's spun out of that is the Women on Wellness that Renee Beaker started. And that was because a group of women in the wellness hour is like, kind of like, can we have a group just for women? Because there's things we want to talk about and we're not, so that is just as big as the wellness hour. That gets 25, 30 women every month.
Wow.
And one thing we've done is, like, as I said, there's so much collective wisdom in this community. So let's capture it. So we don't want to record these sessions because people, for confidentiality, but let's have somebody take notes and share what people feel they can share, like this amazing list of products that Dr. Carnapal did, or, all this insights and advice. So we're using it as a way to not just in the moment provide a place for people to find support and have conversation, but also to generate and capture knowledge that can be shared with the rest of the community. So
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
And then we have another group that called Feeling Fit with FSHD, because we had lots of people who are asking about exercise, and it turns out a lot of people are doing exercise, and some people are saying, this helped me, this thing really helped this issue or that issue. So it's really a patient-led exercise and fitness hour. And that one meets twice a month, because the idea is like you kind of listen, you learn. Like Frank Hanley, who's the Qigong teacher, has done several. He's led series on, using how to strengthen your abdomen through breathing exercises. And then, and he does them all from seated position. So if you can't stand, you can still do these exercises. So the idea there is, you watch, we record that, you practice, and then maybe you come back 2 weeks later. If you have questions, you tried this and you didn't quite get how that worked, or you had this thing, and, so that's Feeling Fit with FSHD.
Nice.
And then there's the early onset roundtable, which Lee is very involved with. And we're both very passionate about this because, well, FSHD is, I think everyone who has this condition drives them a little crazy. The textbook is sort of like, it's an adult onset, slow progressing. It's not going to affect your life very much, and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And fortunately, I think there are people for whom that is largely true, but there are a lot of people for whom it's not. It's so diverse. And there are children who are affected, some from a very young age, and some really devastating, and genetically it's the same disease. We don't know why it's so severe in some children, but we want to make sure that they are included and they're not overlooked as like this rarest of the rare subset. Like, if we get through and we have treatments for FSHD, we have to make sure that children are going to have access to it. Right. And they're treated as a different population, and we don't have nearly enough data on children. We don't have that baseline natural history, very much of it, because the children with FSHD are few and far between. Their families, understandably, are kind of overwhelmed taking care of their children, so they may, thinking about enrolling them in a natural history study might be like the 10th thing on their list. And yet it's so important if we're going to have treatments for children. So Lee and I are really passionate about this, and we're almost feeling like the society needs to have kind of almost like a pediatric focused kind of clone,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
a lot of the same things we're doing for regular FSHD
Yeah.
need to sort of be redone for pediatric FSHD. So, so you're going to hear us making more noise about that.
Yeah. No, and actually, I've kind of sensed that, based even on some of the guests we have today. We've had more recent podcast episodes with the representation of that group, the early onset, parents roundtable and things that are happening in that realm. I think that's a huge value. I mean, I have 2 boys, granted, neither are showing signs, but any parent that's in my situation, it's always in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
So those that it's not in the back of their mind is in the front now. I can completely understand how that would be a massive value to have that kind of resource. Yeah, I just can't imagine not having it. So thank God it's here for them, and that it can grow. And then getting the word out for that. I know that's kind of been a little bit of a struggle, right? To try to get more parents involved, getting to that roundtable group or onto that early onset chapter group, right?
Yeah, it has been. I'm not sure whether, maybe it's a busy time in the evening. It's hard for them to log in, or maybe they don't. But I just want people to know it's very goal oriented. It's part of it is immediate, support and advice if you have a child and what to do about some, issue. Ali Rhodes, who runs it, managed after incredible effort to be able to get her son to get a driver's license. I think we're still in the middle of it. Like, there's so many hoops to jump through. Well, I was like, okay, you got to share what you did, because I'm sure you're not the only parent of a child with FSHD
that's in that story. Yeah.
Dealing that. So there's that, but it's also we have a long-term vision of, just really activating, engaging parents, because if you get parents going, like, there's nothing, they're an unstoppable force.
Right. Like I say, don't mess with the kids. Going. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So then, what is the big plans for the FSHD Society coming in 2023, or maybe more importantly, like, what's the next big event that you're kind of preparing for?
Well, I'm doing more and more research myself. So I'm helping to lead this health economic study, and many of you saw that survey on the true cost.
Yep.
So that was incredible. We have data on 350 individuals in more detail than ever has been collected for FSHD, and it's just for the US. So we have to now analyze that data. We're actually interviewing several statisticians who, we need to bring out the big guns to make sense of the data. We're going to be writing, going through, seeing, we don't even know what we've found yet, and then once we open up the data and start looking at it, we've got to think about what does that mean and how do we explain that, and then we got to write it up, and this is all aimed at influencing policy level discussions about who's going to have access to treatment. How much is it going to cost? How many people are affected? How's it going to affect the healthcare budget for this country if everybody with FSHD is treated at, this way and that way? And now is the time we need to do that, because, the fulcrum, if the phase 3 trial goes successfully, they could come before the FDA in sometime mid to the end of 2024. And then once that's, then it's just this kind of whole process of, getting it onto the market. All rare disease drugs are expensive, just by their nature. But we feel like, so we need to make sure we have the data to support what we would call fair pricing. We want companies to get a return on their investment, but it has to be commensurate with the benefit patients are getting from it, So, and right now there's, very little data around
of what the true cost
we're
is.
Working, So working on that. And I'm working on with a team of 48 experts around the world, an international care standard for FSHD. So what would be considered the gold standard for care for FSHD patients today with what we know? The knowledge is moving forward all the time, but we want to make sure. I mean, I hear from so many people who have nothing, don't meet a doctor who knows anything. They don't even know that physical therapy can be beneficial. They don't have, they know nothing. And so we have to do better. We're trying to do it on an international scale so that we publish it in a way that doctors anywhere in the world will be able to see this and say, okay, this is, if I meet an FSHD patient, this is, I'll turn to this and this will tell me the gold standard for providing care to that patient. And that's, first of all, that's so important for patients, and the vast majority who are not getting any good care at all.
Right.
And it's also so important for research and clinical trials, because if you think about it, if you have a clinical trial and some of your patients are getting physical therapy and good nutrition and, orthotics when they need them, and then a bunch of others are not getting anything and they're getting into, having accidents and getting weaker and, that's going to mess up your trial. So, so we need to make sure there's a high standard of care for everybody.
Wow. That's a huge undertaking, but it sounds like you're making that shift because, a lot of us get the advice of don't do anything, but that's not really right. I think some doctors have misinformation, no information. So how exciting to kind of change that mindset, and that'd be great.
Oh, we hope so.
Yeah. Well, that's not a small task. I totally get that. I mean, it's a huge undertaking, but to be our voice again, June has just been huge, and that seems kind of be I don't know. That seems to be like your thing for our community, between the blog writing, that's organizing. It's been great.
That's where it's going, and we have our conferences and so on. But I did want to say, because I think I'm very passionate about this. I feel incredibly blessed that I'm in this position, and I'm incredibly blessed that all my colleagues at the FSHD Society feel the same way. I mean, they, we make a livelihood from doing this, but we are like working at night, we're working on weekends, we're traveling wherever we need to be you're all in. That kind of passion, they're all in, is amazing. So I want to give a shout out to everybody out there who's on the team. Thank you.
And thank you, June, for being here again on another Giving Tuesday Radiothon. Awesome to see you again and talk again, and look forward to the next time that we can chat.
I look forward to that too, and thank you. I'm going to go back to listening because I'm really enjoying all the interviews you're doing.
Excellent.
Thanks, June.
All right. Take care. Bye.
So June is just a rock star. She just is. She was the very first staffer that we hired, the FSHD Society hired.
I believe so.
10 years. She's been around for 10 years. She's worn many, many, many hats, and used to be like, she still kind of is, but those Japanese plate spinning acts where you just try to keep the wonky one from falling.
Keep all of them. Yes.
Gotta keep them all spinning. Keep all the plates spinning
on the little sticks.
I will just say June has many, many plates. She used to have many, many more than she even has now. But what has been exciting for me in working with June in the last couple of years, and I work with her even more directly now than I did in the beginning, and I love it, is that because we're diversifying and we're getting some more staff as we grow to really lean into the work that needs to be done, she's able to really focus on some of the things she was talking about, which is the patient education and the research. And she's just so great at it. And when we all can lean into our core strengths, we increase our impact, and that's just our education offerings are only going to get better. The different kinds of research we're going to be able to deliver is only going to get better, because she's not trying to carry all the water by herself now. So I think it's pretty awesome.
Well, it goes back to we have staff, there's staff that are at the FSHD Society, but that's because they're all in. You expect 100% attention into your cause. You need to get their attention, meaning you can't have them doing 5 other jobs and then, and I do this thing for the FSHD Society.
That's exactly right. I ran my own nonprofit consulting company for almost 10 years, and I started as a consultant with the FSHD Society, and then I was kind of doing both for a while. I kept coming around as they kept to do more things and was still running my company. And I'm very passionate about that and loved helping nonprofits around the country sort of lean into their strengths and gain more sustainability and all of that. I loved it, but
Right.
I got to a point where I had to be, am I all in
Right.
the
Right, because
FSHD
you're
Society,
splitting your
or
attention.
do I step away and go all in on my company? And I'm just so thankful that, Mark gave me the opportunity and that I said yes, and that I stepped in all in with the FSHD Society. Don't
That's what
regret
it's
it for a
about.
second.
Yeah.
Don't regret it for a second.
Well,
So,
I did warn you, Lee, that the dog might make an appearance. Those that see it
okay.
in a while, he did come. His head is always going to be about right here. And I never
Okay,
like
well,
it,
I
but I'm
think
gonna-
that we decided that when the dog made an appearance, instead of a drinking
Dog made-
game, it's a donation
It's a
game.
donation game. Every time
Everybody pitch
yeah,
in.
if the dog's name is Cooper, so every time we see a Cooper appearance, it's going to
It's a
have to
Cooper
be
sighting.
a Cooper
So
sighting. You got
I
to
think
chip
it's
in.
important to point out we got started a little slow and steady. We know we've got some checks coming in. We know Catherine Wagner very generously is giving donations
Yes, they do.
on behalf of all of her staff team. That's not come in yet. So there is more money out there that will all count towards today's total in the match, but we are hovering still around $6,000. So we're slowing down. It's afternoon lull. Not in the show, not in the guests, not in what we're bringing, but in the giving. And as you know, today, Giving Tuesday, if folks can chip in what they can, it is all matched up to $100,000.